Yeah, I didn't realize that you guys went through a time change last night. I was
Yeah.
because yesterday morning I had done a podcast with a guy from London,
Mhm.
and he didn't mention anything about he didn't mention anything about the time uh difference being off. And then you'd mentioned, oh, it's going to be an hour earlier than you think.
Catches me by surprise every year, so
Yeah,
I did.
and I was like, wait, did they already go through their time change? And
Mm,
because we don't go through our time change for another, I think it's like 2, maybe 3 weeks.
that's right. Yeah, yeah. There's always a bit of a discrepancy there. So.
Yeah. And, just kind of, I haven't been doing the international podcast, like the podcast with the international artists that long. Like we started doing the Zoom version back in February
Mm.
and still trying to get used to the time, like the big
Yeah, of
time
course.
differences and the time changes. Some countries go through it, some of them don't, so it's this whole thing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. International living. It's international. It's the digital age.
Yep. Yep. All right, let me post this on my Facebook and we should be good to go.
Okay.
All right, come on. There it goes. All right. Post. Cool. All right, cool. We are good. So if you are ready, we'll jump into it.
Yeah, man. How long do you want to go for today? Just so I know what to expect.
Um, I mean, honestly, it just really depends on the conversation, but usually we try and shoot for about 45 minutes.
Okay. Yeah, that's cool. That's
Okay.
fine by me.
Unless you have to be somewhere and
No,
then we can.
no, that works. That works fine.
Okay, cool. All right, awesome. All right. Let me make sure. Yep. Okay, cool. All right. Welcome, everybody, to another live and amplified livecast. I'm your host, Tom Quiet, and we're back at it again with another amazing podcast. Today, we have a very special guest. Today, we have Mike Ross. How's it going today, Mike?
Hey, Tom. It's going well. Thank you. It's good to meet you. Thanks for
Good to meet
inviting
you
me
as
on the
well.
show.
Good to be. Thank you. First off, thank you so much for rescheduling with me. I know we tried to do this. I was probably back when you released your most recent single, beginning of October, right? We were originally
Yeah,
supposed to do this.
yeah, I think so. A couple of
And
months ago.
then some things came up and we had to reschedule. And luckily, we were able to get it in before the release of the EP. So that was
Mhm.
perfect timing, I guess. But first off, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. For the people that don't know who you are or aren't familiar with your work, can you kind of give us an origin story and what got you into music type thing?
Yeah, well, I'm based in the south of the UK, so that's Brighton, which is about 50 miles south of London. Although I grew up in the northeast of England, so more like 300 or 400 miles away from here. I play southern rock, roots rock, Americana rock, kind of country rock, I suppose. Depends on where you are in the world as to what that means to you.
Yeah.
But I grew up listening to my parents, Beatles and Stones records. I got into ACDC, and then from there I got into other 70s rock bands, and I never really left. I never really got out of it. I heard the Allman Brothers when I was 16, and that's kind of where I've stayed, really. That thick, juicy early 70s rock sound with good songs and good musicians.
Yeah,
And so that's kind of what I like to get up to.
nice. Have you, since you brought up AC/DC, have you had a chance to listen to their new music they released?
Do you know what? I haven't actually listened to the single yet.
Yeah,
For no good reason, actually. I clicked the little video trailer. I've been so busy at the moment with my new album that it's very difficult to take anybody else's music on
yeah.
because I'm doing lots of
Busy.
interviews and kind of media related stuff to do with that. So I'm overdue a sit down to
Yeah.
listen to that song, actually.
Yeah, just listened to it for the first time yesterday, so I'm right there with you. You know, just kind of working on so much and got so much other things that I very rarely have time to, other than like the bands that I'm doing podcasts with,
Yeah.
like just outside of that, it's like, oh, I didn't know AC/DC released a new single until like the day before it
Yeah.
was going to release, and I was like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna have to try and find time to check that out, and
I think
so.
it's I think it's great. I mean, I love I love ACDC.
Mm,
I love the Bon Scott. DC is my favorite. The '70s stuff is my favorite, but I really like the first albums that Brian Johnson sang on. I went to see ACDC. Was it maybe 3 years ago now when Brian couldn't sing and Axl
yeah,
Rose stood in, and I was really happy that Axl Rose stood in because I don't think Brian sings the Bon Scott stuff so well.
yeah,
Like he sings the stuff that he wrote
yeah,
great, but watching, they played like Rock and Roll Damnation,
yeah,
and stuff that I wouldn't that I've listened to live stuff with Brian singing those songs, and I don't enjoy it so much.
yeah,
But
absolutely,
so it was great for me because Axel could hit all those high notes.
yeah.
It
And
was
and
cool.
at least you could say you were there during that weird period of AC/DC where
Yeah.
Axl Rose was the lead singer for, it wasn't that long, right? It was only like a handful of shows.
It was like one, maybe even just European tour.
Yeah,
I don't really know the ins and outs of it, but Brian was diagnosed with some kind of potentially catastrophic
yeah,
hearing
yeah,
loss, and that's ACDC is a big machine. It's like a big super tanker
yeah,
traveling the Atlantic,
yep,
and you can't put the brakes on so quickly. So
yep,
he couldn't do it. So they drafted Axel in. But I'm pleased that they got back. And from what little I understand of the project that they're doing, it's like they're working on stuff that they have already in the studio that Malcolm played on. So
yeah,
I kind of get. I think I like the sound of
yeah,
that project. Yeah, and it was also that just after all that stuff had gone on with Phil Rudd as well. So he was like on trial at the time or
yeah,
something, for,
yeah,
threatening to kill somebody. But they had a different drummer in. But it looks like he's back in the fold now, and
yeah,
I don't really. Who knows what goes on in his personal life? But as a drummer, I really like him. And my
yeah,
regular drummer, Darren Lee, plays on my albums and a lot of the time live. He's a huge Phil Rudd fan, so we're happy he's back on the stool,
yeah,
even if his behaviour leaves something to be desired.
yeah,
But it's
absolutely.
rock and roll, right? People are surprised by people who, somebody like that. There's been rock and roll their whole life, but they're not.
Yeah,
They never pretend to be good boys.
yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, you go and look at like the Motley Crue like documentary, or not documentary, the biopic movie they did, and they show like all the craziness they did, and then by proxy Ozzy. But we always knew Ozzy was a little left of center.
Yeah,
And so
well, kind of most of them, really. It's
yeah,
maybe when they were younger, but Phil maybe he's carried it on a little longer than you may expect some
yeah,
others to do. But he's like I say, it's no surprise to me that rock and roll drummers behave badly because
yeah,
that's why they get into rock and roll, isn't it? So, well, they did. Maybe not so much nowadays.
yeah, absolutely. But you've been very, very busy this year.
As
You've been
busy as I
releasing
could
all
be.
kinds of
Mhm.
music.
Mhm.
You already released an album this year, correct? A full length,
Well, I
or
yeah, kind of,
oh,
kind of.
okay,
I so. I mean, like the rest of us, everybody, everything took a big left turn
Yeah.
sometime around early March, and so I had a busy year of touring
Hmm.
scheduled, and I had always planned to release an album. Like my new album comes out next week, and we'll get to that.
Hmm.
But that would have been the only album I would have planned to release this year. However, kind of, I was driving to a show on just the last couple of days of February, and I live in Brighton, so everywhere in Brighton, when you want to go everywhere, you have to drive around London. So
Okay.
you take the ring road around London to get north.
Yeah.
There's no way around it. And my I was driving in my van and I had an accident.
Okay.
So the van I was smashed the van up. I did these two shows, just solo shows, and I got back home and I'm like, what the hell am I gonna do? My van is kind of my living, you know. It had
Hmm.
all my equipment in it. I drive from here. I drive to like Norway or
Oh,
Sweden or Spain or France, Germany,
yeah.
all over the UK. So the van was kind of. I only saw it once more, and that's when I went to get my things out of it. You know, it was dead.
Hmm.
It probably was repairable, but when I was chasing around, kind of trying to figure all that stuff out, how do I buy this back from the insurance, and where do I get it repaired? You know, at that time we were still laughing at Italy because Italy were having problems with coronavirus, and it was
Yeah.
only like Italy and China had a problem. And then, so I'm running around trying to figure this out, trying to get something sorted for all of, because from the middle of March way up to the sort of end of July, I was busy and I needed this van. And then like I started getting cancellations. You know, I was supposed to go to Norway, and it didn't happen, and something else happened, and then like it was just an avalanche.
Hmm.
We all experienced. You know, suddenly we're all locked in our houses. We can't go anywhere, and there's no in the UK. It was really strange things were happening. Like you couldn't buy toilet roll. You know, there was
Yeah.
like you
It
couldn't
was
buy.
same thing here in the U.S.
I was going to the supermarket to just get like my normal delivery, my normal food, and there was like people with 200 frozen pizzas.
Yeah.
Why are you buying? What is
Yeah.
civilization going to collapse? So you're going to stock up on $2
Frozen.
pizzas,
Yeah.
So rapidly became obvious to me that this year was not going to be the year that was planned.
Yep.
So the kind of the van going was a bit of an early warning sign for me. So in the end I just let it go, and I got some insurance money, and I've been living off that money.
Yeah.
So I had things like I had some unreleased live work. I had an electronic album which was never supposed to see the light of day. It was just to be something I was working on, just to get some sounds to combine with the new rock album I'm just about to put out.
Yeah.
But really, so this I'm in my studio now. I have a little cabin at the bottom of my garden here, and this is where I do a lot of my music making. And it was just here, like every day for 3 months. We couldn't really leave the house. There was no money coming in, so I have behind this laptop I'm talking to you. I have another computer. I have other equipment,
Yeah.
and I was just like, well, what can I do? How do I make this work?
Yeah.
So I was live streaming and working on whatever stuff I could get out. So I haven't had like an official um, like physical release this
Okay.
year, but I've released maybe 5 or 6 different albums through something like things like Bandcamp,
Yeah.
just
So,
to keep the wheels in motion.
so Dystopia Rising isn't like a physical
Yeah,
or
no, and what Dystopia Rising is, it's a 35-minute piece that was my new album is called The Clovis Limit Part
part
2,
two, which
and
is a sequel to part one
yeah, yeah,
that you released last year.
right, yeah. So the Clovis Limit, the idea with the Clovis Limit, the music, and I don't know what you guys call it in Waco, Texas, but here in the UK, the music that I play, I try to call it Americana music,
Okay.
and what that means to me is everything from Native American ritual music to slave music to Appalachian folk music, which was related to Irish folk music,
Hmm.
that all the way up to like Neil Young and the James Gang, and
Yeah.
anything that's contemporary, anything from the last 250 years of
Yeah.
American history, that's Americana to me. And so, in trying to kind of phrase that in a way that makes sense to the public, rather than just releasing all these separate things,
Hmm.
I'm known as a blues guitar player. Blues, I like blues. I mean, I'm not like a straight Chicago or Texas or Mississippi Delta blues player, but
Yeah.
I have those influences. But it's never been my intention just to sit in one style. So I borrow a part from like country blues and stick it to something else and something else, and that really confuses people, confuses my listeners. So I wanted to draw with Clovis One, that I recorded that in Nashville. I went out and used a Nashville session band and recorded that, and then came back and finished it here in the UK. But the main parts of it were out there. Um, and then Clovis 2, the link between them is that really I wrote all those songs at the same sort of time. I had
Okay.
these big pool of songs. So it's not so much that part 2 is a continuation of part 1. It's that for me, I had a big bunch of songs. I took half of them to America to record.
Hmm.
And they were the ones that were suitable to have fiddle and pedal steel and
Yeah.
3/4 harmonies on.
They fall more under the, not country, because that isn't really country music. It's more like bluegrassy.
Well, it's yeah. I struggle to like I
Yeah.
say, Americana is like a catch-all term for it, but
Yeah.
country rock maybe,
Okay. Yeah.
roots
I got
rock,
it.
like kind of like Steve Earle,
Yeah.
or
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
Gillian Welsh, David Rawlings, that kind of thing. So that's kind of one facet of this thing that I call Americana,
Hmm.
and then there's also this early '70s, kind of British bands that went to America, like Humble Pie, or people like the James Gang,
Yeah.
the Allman Brothers, obviously, the Southern rock kind of, as it became, they weren't called Southern rock,
So, yeah. At the time. Yeah.
doors. So that's like another facet of my musical personality. So it felt right to call this new album Part 2 because it's finishing off like the saga of these 20 songs. But what I wanted to do this time, like I'm a sci-fi fan, and I
Mhm.
and I you know and I like this idea of stepping between different versions of myself. So the country rocker, the riff, the finger picking folk singer.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to kind of to kind of create this environment where I could do that, and also and combine the things that I like. So which boils down to I wanted to have like some like weird spaceship noises in
Yeah.
between songs. Simply, that's
Yeah.
what I wanted to do. So I have a synthesizer here, no Moog synthesizer, Moog, if you're American, and some other bits and pieces here, tape delays, and I just made a loads of crazy noises and just backwards
Yeah.
guitars, and like like I have a little toy piano.
Oh, nice.
So
Yeah.
if you play that and you slow it right down and then reverse it, you get some really weird stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so I had this thing which is about half an hour long, and my intention was just to take small parts of it and dust it over the finished tracks for
Yeah.
Clovis 2. But what it ended up with was this quite weird, unsettling, and quite but dramatic sounding thing of its own. So yeah, around I don't know, it's maybe like the 18th of March or
Hmm.
something. We couldn't buy any toilet roll. We
Yeah.
didn't know what was going on. The government were being really like we've all had a similar experience of how capitalist governments are treating this pandemic. Nobody
Yeah.
wants to admit there's anything wrong. So none of us have a clue, and it was really scary. It was frightening, and the noises. In my head, like, well, what the hell's going to happen? Is this the end? Is it? Is dystopia rising? Is there a, is it? Are we going to end up like that the road? You know, that Cormac
Mhm.
McCarthy movie. Is this, what's going on? And then it just, the light bulb went off. I said, I have this 35-minute piece of music that really sounds like how I'm feeling right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I kind of just banged it together and got a friend of mine to draw some artwork up and released it, and that kind of set me going, because then I'm, instead of just sitting there going, oh my god, what am I going to do,
Yeah.
it's like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm gonna push my boundaries as an artist, and I'm gonna release music, and I'm gonna provide people with a soundtrack to these crazy times, and that early part of lockdown for us, when, for me, sitting here kind of doing these live streams and hearing people back going, oh thanks man, because we're going nuts here, and having something to focus on, like your little acoustic live set
Yeah.
that you're playing, through my phone,
Yeah.
is really giving us, we're really getting something out of it. So therefore, I kind of committed to releasing at least one album every month. I've been doing something every month on Bandcamp, partly financially, obviously, because
Yeah.
my touring income went south.
And doing
And
it through Bandcamp's a really good choice because they've been really musician friendly
yeah,
throughout the entire pandemic. Because they're still doing the, was it first Saturday of every month, or
Bandcamp Fridays,
oh,
yeah.
Bandcamp Fridays? Okay,
So I
that's what.
think they started that in April. I mean, I
Okay.
put this thing out on in the middle of March, and then a couple of other friends of mine who do occasionally use Bandcamp, they were starting to do the same, and then I think they did it from April, and then they did it for 3 months, and now they're doing it every month. And so that first day of the month, they don't take any revenue. I think, is it maybe they take 20% or something like that normally. So it's
Yeah.
not like a massive amount they take
Yeah.
anyway. But it was a really nice gesture, so it fit in quite nicely with my idea of how am I going to do it. Like that helped me to make the decision. So I released a bunch of stuff. I didn't do anything this month because I really wanted, since the end of July, I've also been releasing singles for this new album, which is,
Mm.
you know, has like CDs, and it's like a proper release of new material rather than a live record or some demos or whatever.
Yeah. Gotcha. And so you released so for the Clovis Limit Part Two that releases on Friday,
Mhm.
you released a single for it, which is "Don't Say a Word." That's the single for Clovis.
That's the current single, yeah, yeah. I mean, there's been
Or
three. So since July, there's been three, but Don't Say the Word is the newest one, and that's,
okay.
so it's been getting, yeah, it's good results. We've got picked. There's a magazine here in the UK called Classic Rock, which is like the biggest rock magazine left. There's not that many of them
Yeah.
nowadays, and they selected it as one of their tracks of the week, so it got into their feature, and yes, getting a lot of plays on the kind of on Spotify and those kind of places, and yeah, lots of press. So for me, it's, I mean, all my songs sound the same to me. I don't really know whether it's a country song or a folk song or a rock song or this, that, the other. But particularly for this record, I did try to focus a bit more, so to give people a bit more of a chance of understanding where it is that I'm coming from. So
Yeah.
the references, like a lot, when you see my band play live, you sound a lot like Government Mule, for
Yeah.
example. Maybe not quite as heavy as those guys, but very much sort of the jam band around a good song kind of vibe.
Yeah.
So bringing an awareness of that to the media marketing campaign, and maybe the single selection and stuff, it's been really helpful, because I think, as I said earlier, I tend to confuse the hell out of people because they don't know what version of me they're gonna get.
Yeah. I got you. So since you're a little less than a week away from the release of the Clovis Limit Part Two,
Hmm.
what's kind of going through your head right now as you prepare for this, like, final?
Well, I mean, what I'm really into, I'm shipping pre-orders, so
Mm.
I do all that myself. So they're coming through thick and fast at the moment. Although there's always room for another one if
Yeah.
anybody's watching. So they're all shipping from here. I have the merch piled up here
Yeah.
and in my house, and I'm going to the post office every day. So there's that, and then interviews like this, and we're also rehearsing because I have a live show on Thursday night,
Okay. And
and
that's the release show.
the release show. Yeah, so I mean, it's been in the diary for months and months. We didn't really know how we were gonna do it.
Yeah.
We knew there'd be something. What that would be, if it was going to be me in here playing through it and chatting about it, or but it's in actually in this just over here, like near where I am in the town. There's a recording studio where I did some of the basic
Yeah.
tracks for the album in Brighton Electric. So they have a little venue, like 150 cap venue in the complex. So we're doing a broadcast from there. We were hoping to have an audience. But we can't do it.
Mm.
The regulations at the moment
Or
for
just yeah.
say we can't do it. But we're live streaming on multiple cameras,
Okay.
and we are using one of the things I've done through during lockdown to keep myself occupied is instead of just making like a video for the singles, two or
Hmm.
three videos, I actually made a video for every song on the album,
Oh wow.
um, using a combination of some stock footage and some stuff that, like one of the songs, I have a friend that lives in Tennessee,
Hmm.
and he went to muscle shows for in Alabama for the weekend. So
Hmm.
he just like took some film driving across the bridges and driving through muscle shows, and he sent that to me, and I made a little movie. And then I did some stuff with green screens. So I've actually made in the end I ended up making a film of the whole album, which will be
Hmm.
released down the line. So I've taken little excerpts from that film. So when we're doing the show, you'll get like if for those of you that they're already on my fan page on Facebook, I've been showing these bits of video for the last few weeks, and some of it is little bits of I did some interviews in here with a friend of mine.
Yeah.
So at the live show, we're going to drop some bits of those interviews in, we drop some bits of film, and then cut to the live band. So it's a bit more of a multimedia event, trying to make the most of the format, instead of just being like an old fashioned
Yeah.
live gig.
Yeah.
So I'm doing things for that, and that's everything from making sure that the band, myself and the band, we're up to scratch with that, and putting promo for that, and I have I have a couple of extra guests coming to augment the band lineup, so just making sure everybody's got what they need, and
Yeah.
you know, so
Absolutely.
there's plenty for me to be getting on with.
Absolutely. So for the Clovis Limit Part Two, are you doing anything pressing vinyl at all, or are you just doing straight digital and like CDs?
Well, I've got CDs. I will do a vinyl. How I did so with Clovis One,
Hmm.
that came out last April, and I did CD.
Hmm.
And then the beginning, yeah, well, it didn't really work out because of COVID. But
Yeah.
because at that time I was so busy with with a touring schedule with a slightly different band, and I was also collaborating with some friends of mine in another kind of more rocky project.
Hmm.
So a lot of the touring I did last year didn't really reflect what Clovis One was
Yeah.
like as a record, the instrumentation or whatever. So this year I had a whole bunch of stuff worked out with a band that was more, put together to tour the songs from Clovis One. And in support of that, I had a lot of merch ordered up, T-shirts, and the vinyl version of Clovis One,
Hmm.
which has largely remained unsold because I haven't done any shows. So
Yeah.
that's kind of been leapfrogged now. So I did a CD for the first issue of this, and then it is my hope in maybe March, April, maybe next year to be able to book a proper tour.
Hmm.
Get back out with a good band and with with a
Yeah.
good organization, and then so I'll do a vinyl run in support of that.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's amazing to see that vinyl is coming back. Like, I'll go to like not so much right now, but I'll go to little independent shows or whatever, and I'll see artists with their 45s or like whatever they have, and it's like I almost much rather pay the premium on that and then just go listen to their music on Spotify, like keep the vinyl like as pristine as possible,
Well,
just because it's like a piece of art, you know? It's like
absolutely,
so
it's an absolute event. You know, I mean, I never so a really short version of my musical history is that I got into playing, you know, with touring bands and sign
mhm,
bands or whatever in a kind of mid '90s originally.
mm,
But at which point vinyl was just becoming obsolete and nobody was buying it at shows.
yeah,
Certainly, you
yeah,
know, you'd get CDs made, and we were really proud to be able. I mean, like at first it was cassettes, and I still have some from my old band in my loft. You know,
and
and
cassettes are making a comeback as well.
they seem to be, don't they? Although I'm not. I don't condone that because they were a
Yeah.
shitty format right
Oh,
back,
yeah, oh, yeah.
and they remain. They're although it was good for ripping off. Anyway, so you know, like the my experience when I kind of got out of that making original music for a little while, kind of 2006, vinyl was nowhere.
Mhm,
It was all CDs. There were no digital
mhm.
really. There was, you know, like people were buying something and then copying it onto their computer and then
Yeah,
sticking it on their video iPod.
yeah,
That was how you did it then. Um, I never so I and I'd never released anything under my own name on vinyl. I was on some singles that by under under other band names that I played on, and I never really expected to have my own albums, you know.
yeah,
And then, but with the kind of demise of the or the dismantling of the industry, you know, around it goes kind of hand in hand with artists reaching fans directly
mhm,
via this kind of format, you know,
yeah,
social media. Um, the pressing plants, the t-shirt makers, the lanyard makers, whoever it is,
yep,
they all have had to open their doors direct to artists, whereas
yeah,
before it would have been done by the label.
yeah,
And
there's, like, middlemen.
yeah, so I mean, I think the punk scene was always quite DIY, but
Yeah,
you know, everybody else would you would go to an independent label, they would pay for all of that, they'd put you out on a road, and then they'd repay themselves from the revenue from distribution or whatever,
yep,
or not, as the case
yeah,
may be. But you know, I never expected to be my own artwork director
yeah,
and digital aggregator and tour manager and this kind of thing, but kind of coming back to it after a little break and being a bit older and wiser, and looking at what artists were doing, it's like, oh well, you know, you can do it yourself.
mhm,
So you know, the when I did the first vinyl album I did in my own name was my album Jenny's Place, which was 2016. The vinyl version of that came out, and it's fantastic, you know, because I get to choose the artwork, I got to do the gatefold, I get to choose the design of the labels and everything, and it's hard work, I found that compared to when I was in the past, where decisions were made for me and I didn't get the outcome that I wanted, you know,
yeah,
it's really empowering, and you know, it allows you to. I mean, you know, I can sell those and make money, which I can pay my rent,
yeah,
and it keeps the whole thing going. But yeah, you know, going back to my early days again, growing up in the northeast of England, and on a Friday afternoon, I'd get the bus into school, I'd get my pocket money, or I had a paper round, and I'd go and buy a record from the local. In England, it was like our price, maybe.
mhm,
You had those there, you know, this small chain of stores,
yeah,
and they would have all of these, you know, Jimi Hendrix and Rolling Stones and Eric Clapton and AC/DC, and they were
yeah,
like what we called mid price. So
yeah,
they might be like $4, $5 or something like that.
yeah,
It was about as much as I had. So I kind of just buy the one I like the look of because I didn't know what any of them were like. I just think, well, that's a cool guitar on the cover of that. I'll buy
yeah,
that,
yeah,
and then sort of sit and read it on the bus on the way home, or you
yeah,
know, ingest all of the information, and then it didn't really matter what it sounded like because it was such an event for me, you know.
yeah,
So being able to continue that in my own way now with the Clovis One on vinyl,
mhm,
nice big, you know,
yep,
chunky thing you can hold in your hand, and I did an insert for it, and you know, the even just the restrictions of the time. So when you create an album, if you create an album that's made for CD only, you never have to consider the playlist per side,
Yeah.
So when you make an album that you're going to put out on vinyl, you have to be conscious that really, if you don't want the quality to suffer, you've got a maximum of about 22 minutes
Yeah.
per side. And so that
Yep.
influences the running order, and
Yep.
so it felt very natural for me to do that because I've spent my life listening to vinyl.
Yep.
But compared to albums that are made on CD, long tracks, it just it helps you with it helped me with the arrangements and with the presentation of it. So
Yeah.
it's like an intrinsic part of the process for me.
Yeah.
But I'm looking forward to doing a Clovis vinyl. Yeah, I mean, I think
Right.
because of the playing time of that, Clovis 2 probably be a double. So
Okay. Nice. Yeah, there's a band that I follow down here in Central Texas that they're doing a very old school approach with their music release. They're not releasing it as vinyl, but they're releasing like it's vinyl. So they're doing like an A side, B side single. So like
okay,
if
good. Yeah.
yeah, so they're doing like if it were like a 45 or something, you'd get like a single on there. So it'd be like A side, B side, and it's like that's really cool. And I hope to one day that they get to a point where they could afford to press vinyl because, vinyl isn't cheap and it's not easy. Well, I mean, it's a lot easier now than it was probably 5 years ago to press vinyl, but
It's just the upfront cost. That's the
yeah,
trouble. I mean, you could do it. I could give you the website link now of a
mhm,
company in America that could do it,
yeah,
and it's totally doable. But you have to buy 500.
yeah.
So
You
you're
you
talking
gotta you gotta make it worth their while because they do gotta make don't they have to make like a template or something or like
exactly.
a
It's cut from a glass master, yeah. So
yeah,
actually no, sorry. With vinyl, it's metal. So they have it. You make a metal master,
mhm,
and then the vinyl is pressed from that.
yeah,
So, but I mean, you can get small runs made. They're just very expensive, so you don't make much money when you sell them.
yeah,
But if you buy in like 500
yeah.
vinyls,
You
then
can get
then
it.
they come down to a relatively small number of pounds or dollars each.
Yeah,
So, but then you are sitting on 500 of them. So you have to be committed to the touring cycle
yeah,
that's going to let you get rid of those,
yep,
which is
absolutely.
where like in my case, I lost all my touring, so I'm sitting on like 400 Clovis One vinyls that they're probably going to be around for a little while.
Yeah, until
But
you can get back out on the road and
yeah, yeah, start selling them again.
yeah,
Although I've sold some on the web store, but nowhere
yeah,
near as many as I would have done if I'd have been in front of audiences.
yeah, absolutely. It's you were talking about the punk scene always kind of being DIY and doing everything themselves. Sat here and watched a lot of punk bands have to kind of close up shop during this pandemic because they can't because they thrived and like touring was their thing. They would tour for 6 months,
Mm.
take like maybe a month or two off to regenerate or go write or go into the studio or whatever, and then they're back on the road for 6 months.
Mm.
And they've got like they either got their own printing shop so they can print their own shirts, merchandise, all that stuff, or they know somebody that does, and so it's just really interesting the way the punk scene kind of does it. The thing is it's dirty and you got to be able to get your elbows dirt. You got to be able to get your hands dirty and just kind of jump in and do what you got to do to make a buck.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it is just it's if you want to do something, do it. And whatever that is, you've just got to get in it. Um, but it is just kind of just getting down to, or putting your money where your mouth is, ordering a bunch of shirts, getting in a van, sleeping in the van,
Hmm.
and I was doing that for a few years. I mean, kind of got a little bit above that now, but just driving around by myself, playing solo shows with a pile of merch that nobody was buying, but
Yeah.
just being seen, and then just building it and building it and building it. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, all of that's come to a halt for most people at the
Yeah.
moment. So
Um,
that's what inspired me to just try and keep as much of it going as I could online, because
yeah.
I don't want to be left behind when when things start to get back towards like a relatively normal touring
Yeah.
circuit.
Yeah, absolutely. So For Clovis One, you recorded that mainly in Nashville. You brought it back to the UK to work on it your own, but you mainly recorded it in Nashville. And then Clovis Two, you recorded in Brighton, you said?
Yeah, yeah. So um, it was all actually the majority. Again, I mean, I said I had a couple of busy years, right?
Yeah.
So I went to Nashville in April of 2017. As I
Okay.
say, the kind of so go back a bit further. So in 2016, my album Jenny's Place came out, and that's when
Mhm.
I was going around everywhere that I could get. A lot of the time by myself, sometimes with the band, and just playing all these shows, not turning any work down, just trying to build and build and build. And all the time I was doing that, I was demoing. So if I had like a guitar in a hotel room or sitting in a
Yeah.
bus or whatever, I was sketching loads of ideas. It was a very creative time for me. So I had a bunch of songs, which became Clovis One and Two,
Mhm.
and so the opportunity to come to Nashville, I didn't I didn't turn it down, but I wasn't expecting it. You know, I have a friend from England that moved out there, and he introduced me to a guy that has a studio there, and so you know, I kind of followed the opportunity rather than decided from out of nowhere that I was going to do it. So a bunch of the songs went, so I went them, and then came back, and then immediately went on tour to we went to Spain. Did a tour of Spain. Spain's quite a big country. I mean, it's not as big as Texas, but it probably is as big as Texas. Spain's big. So
Yeah.
we were there for a while, driving around. I was still doing these songs and demoing things. And then we got back, and then we went into the studio for another 4 days, where I did the basic recording of Clovis Two, and then I didn't get an opportunity to work on it for a long time because I was out on the road touring and finishing off Clovis One and you know, working with other artists and things like that. So it wasn't until last summer. So it was almost 2 years after the kind of basic tracks got recorded that I was able to sit down in here and finish them off. So I had kind of a long gestation period,
Yeah.
which was I think it worked out very very well because it gave me the opportunity. I was thinking about them a lot. In fact, it was driving me nuts. I thought I was never going to get them finished, you know. Um, so by the time I came down to do it, I was able to do it relatively quickly because I had this plan and bosh bosh
Mhm.
bosh bosh bosh. Um, but the yeah, so I guess it's to just hit me there, like when we talk about it, the relief that I'm feeling that it's finally coming out.
Yeah. Yeah,
This is,
because it's
you know,
been such a long journey throughout the entire process of the creation
yeah,
from Clovis One now to Clovis Two. And of course, with COVID, it's one of those things where it's like, do we even really want to release this album if we can't do a show or if we can't tour off it or
yeah. I
but
think the decision. So I think I might have got my dates wrong there, but so it was 18. It was 18 that I went to Nashville.
okay.
So it's 2 years, just over 2 years since I did that, give or take. But still, it's a long
Yeah.
period.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, usually these things kind of get you go in the studio, finish it, you come out, and then the process starts. Um, but yeah, it was there was a question for a while about whether I would release this album this year. And but because it had already been long enough, I'm like I know that because I'm still writing songs now. You know, I'm still working on new material, not all the time,
Yeah.
but you know regularly. So the danger was that it would just get leapfrogged by the new stuff,
Yeah.
and I didn't want that to happen because it's a really good record, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
and I wanted it to get it out. So although it may not have made the best sense in terms of you know maximizing what I might be able to do with it in terms of touring or whatever, um, I needed to get it out. It was a decision, and it's kind of also wedded to that thing of you know, I've made a lot of new fans in lockdown. I've increased my fan base and I've increased my kind of engagement with the fans that I already had. They understand me a lot more. You know, this documentary thing that I put out and
Mhm.
just having more time to communicate with them socially and then coming. I did live streams in here where
Yeah.
people were asking questions and you know so. So kind of growing my audience in all different directions. It's like, well, I'm going to continue with that.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you it would be like, this would be a really bad missing part
Yeah.
of me,
Absolutely.
because this Clovis 2 record is absolutely the best thing that I've ever managed to put out. You
Yeah.
know, it's the most kind of evolved in terms of the, the way that it really captures the the best of what I'm able to do
Yeah.
as a singer and a songwriter and a guitar player, you know, and arranger.
Absolutely. And that makes me so happy to hear that, because, you know, like back in the beginning of the pandemic, when everything kind of went into lockdown, you saw two different types of musicians. You saw the one musician that didn't have anything ready, hadn't been in the studio a long time, hadn't been writing. They just packed it up and not calling it a career, but
Mm.
okay, well, I'm not going to do anything until this whole pandemic thing kind of figures itself out. And then you've got the second type of musician that either is always writing, was lucky enough just to have gone into the studio, or has the ability to record themselves, you know, so that, like, that type of musician where it's like, okay, now they're going to really hit the ground running. They can't do shows, but they're going to figure out a way to make it work.
Mm.
And I think a lot of the musicians that have kind of figured out a way to make it work, they're seeing their following growing, like just astronomical numbers. Like, I think, I don't have the numbers right in front of me. I know for us personally at Live and Amplified, we've almost grown by 40% just during the pandemic, you know, at
It's
a
amazing.
time.
Yeah. Well, it's just, I mean, it's forced an evolution onto us, hasn't it? It's for,
Yeah.
you know, for better or worse, and not all of it's good, because the effect it's had on, live.
Hmm.
But but I guess the way that I've been choosing to see it from the outset is that, um, the growth will come out of it.
Yeah.
You have to find a way of looking at it that allows you to not feel out of control with it. You know,
Yeah. Absolutely.
for example, my wife's Swedish.
Mm.
She has a house in Sweden. Most of her grandparents all have, so we go out there occasionally. And about 2, maybe 3 years ago, there was a huge forest fire in Sweden. I mean,
Mhm.
the house is quite a long way up, so, and it's not so populous, so that it's not like California where you're fighting like gardens and houses and freeways and things.
Yeah.
It can burn for weeks without
Eh,
getting anywhere near anybody's house.
mm.
There's tens of thousands of, they have hectares there, but hundreds and hundreds of square miles of forest burning, and you wouldn't know because there's no houses. But we went up there, and you could see, the smoke going, and it's crazy. And then actually we went this year, and we ended up driving back. We had to take a big detour the year of the fire because we couldn't. The road was blocked. So this
Mhm.
year we drove through there, and this big fire that was catastrophic and was a really big deal for the whole of Northern Europe. Like flights were cancelled. They had firefighters driving from Poland
Yeah.
up to way down. They were driving all the way up there to help put it out, and the Italian had these big Italian aeroplanes dumping water on it. It
Yeah.
was a huge big deal for the whole of Europe. And 3 years later, 2, 3 years later, you go, now there's a lot of fresh growth there. The trees
Mm.
are gone. So if there's a forest fire, and then and look at it, I don't know about in the States, but in the UK, the touring circuit is kind of broken.
Mhm.
A lot of it is kind of broken. On the level that I'm at, the venues, they aren't that great. They're not that well supported. They don't look great.
Yeah.
The pay is shitty. It's just not. We do it because we
Mm.
have to, because that's the circuit. But there are
Yeah.
there are some venues that are really good and well run, and they don't provide that kind of
Yeah.
half baked experience. And they're the ones that are still around. They're the ones that are finding ways to help musicians through this.
Yep.
And then the ones that are the toilets that nobody, that weren't that supportive, they're just going to go, and they're going to be replaced by new ones from people that are setting up for the right reasons, I guess.
Yeah.
So like a forest fire, it can be catastrophic at the moment that it's happening, and it can take a while to kind of rebuild, or
Yeah.
to regrow. but usually it's kind of good for the environment.
Gotcha.
It's really good for the conditions. And I
Huh.
think that, you know, there are a lot of artists that maybe weren't into it for the right reasons anyway, or they were into it because it was easy, or because,
Hmm.
because they could get away with things. So
Yep.
you've got committed artists, which is what I try to be. Authentic artist, somebody
Yep.
that's trying to do their best to say something that means something to them rather than just pretend. So they're all going. People like that, I hope for me is that they're going to go through the growth, and and those kind of values are going to shine through.
Hmm.
That's going to help us to have those opportunities, as live gigs and whatever become more available. There's an English, I won't mention him by name, but there's a guitar player on my scene. He's quite well known over here, and his posts are almost always negative at the moment on
Hmm.
social media. I mean, he lost big tours. He
Yeah.
lost a lot of money. He lost the culmination of quite a lot of work. So I
Yeah.
don't blame him for being, for
Matt.
feeling.
Yeah.
But he's like, I can't wait for all of this to blow over so we can get back to the way things used to be.
Yeah.
And right from the outset of this, I think I've realised that it's never going to be the way that it used to be. And
Yeah. There's
once
so
it's
many.
gone.
We've already lost so many venues. And it's not going to be like it was this time last year.
No, I
It's,
don't
it's
think
just
so.
not.
And it's going to take. I was chatting on the phone. I'm working with trying to find a new agent at the moment, and I was talking to somebody recently, and who's a respected agent here in the UK, and his view that it was going to take at least 5 years to put things
Oof.
back. You
Yeah.
know, because you've got a backlog. He books American. He works with artists from all over the world, and he books them all over Europe. And you've just got a backlog of bands that are waiting to tour, that are waiting to come out.
Mhm.
Tickets are pre-sold for a year's worth of shows. Now they've
Yeah.
all been punted to next year.
Yep.
So where's the shows that I'm trying to get? They're going to be in 2022.
Yeah.
So then what? But like another analogy is like a big pile up on the freeway,
Yeah.
and the first car can be moving, but it's going to take a long time to get the other car from the to go
Yeah.
back through. So yeah, yeah. But what I do strongly believe is that sitting around bitching about it is never gonna it's never a good solution. Negativity is never a good solution. So
Yeah.
finding a way out, streaming a show to an empty room, and selling tickets to the YouTube link or whatever is, if that's what we've got to do to get it done, then that's
Yeah.
what I'm going to do.
Yeah. There's plenty of people doing it. They're showing that it's successful. Like I know Red Rocks Amphitheater, which is a pretty big venue over here, they've done a couple of different things where they'll bring a band in and do an empty stadium or empty theater live show. And I know like the Ryman in Nashville is doing one tonight. And so I don't know if that's like this the venue doing that or if like bands are coming and renting it out and then just kind of doing.
Well, I mean, a bit of both. Sometimes it's the venue, sometimes the artist, sometimes it's the agent or the
Yeah.
promoter. It really depends on it. And I mean, here in the UK, in Brighton, there's a theatre called the Dome Theatre, and they've got a series of shows, and we have, they have this term here, socially distanced. I don't know if that's getting used in the States.
Yeah, it
Um,
is.
yeah, I mean,
It
I
is.
prefer physically distanced
Yeah.
because it's not socially distanced, and
Yeah.
socially distanced means something else that I don't like the tone of that. But we have these restrictions, so you can have like maybe a third of your capacity or something.
Yeah.
So in a venue like that, they have the tables and it's all clearly lined out, and it's table service for the drinks and blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then it's streamed. So and I think really that we're long overdue streaming gigs, just like on a general basis,
Yeah.
because my launch show, I've sold tickets to people in California.
Yeah.
I've sold a ticket to somebody in Russia, because I play in Russia now and again. So there's people from Moscow to LA
Yeah.
gonna watch my live show on Thursday night that's being filmed in Brighton.
Yeah.
And so the launch show, was it, when was it? Was it last year? Yeah. So the launch show for the Clovis One. Okay, so I filmed it, but it never occurred to me to stream it live.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me. Why would I need to do that? I'm selling tickets for the people to come to the show. There was just no precedent to maybe offer a cheaper ticket that you could access the live stream for.
Yeah.
But we filmed that on 3 cameras, and I bet all 3 of those cameras had Wi-Fi and could have been connected to a streaming
Oh
box,
yeah.
and we could have just done it.
Yeah.
But so that's not going away, and I think that can only be a good thing
Yeah.
for artists' revenues. As the venue capacities go up and the technology becomes more commonly used, then
Hmm.
I think
Yeah.
I think it's okay. But there's clearly some painful times that we've had and that we're gonna have
Hmm.
before that starts to settle down and we start to maybe see all of the benefits.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's we're gonna be in for some interesting times, but luckily, like you'd mentioned, it is really easy to do a multicam live stream. Like
Mhm.
you can do it on your phone. Like you could ultimately do it on your phone. You can do it with GoPros. Like I know GoPros have wireless features,
Yeah.
so it's really simple to do. You just gotta kind of have some know-how on how to rig
Yeah,
it.
I mean, I've done those in here with 3. I did it with 3 cameras, and it was this laptop and 2 phones.
Yeah.
And then like I had my keyboards here, so when I was playing the keyboard, I just put one of the phones here, and then
Yep.
playing, singing at the camera, and then I had something else over there.
Yep.
The difficulty in doing that as a
Is you
performer
gotta
is that,
unless you have somebody switching for you, that
yeah,
that,
no,
that
yeah, it gets difficult, and also it's just keeping an eye on the tech.
yeah,
Like I mean, you and I can both see that this is going live onto YouTube because it's
yeah,
this and that, but that we're just chatting. So if I had got my guitar out and started to play songs, and I'm thinking about the words and
yeah,
whether or not I'm like drooling while I'm
yeah,
singing, and what
yeah.
all of this other stuff, and then wondering how it's sounding, and
Oh yeah.
so
When
on a
that's the
one-to-one level, it can be really challenging. But
yeah,
but
and
I mean,
that's the hard part about Zoom here is because it's mainly for meetings and conversations like this. The second you introduce instruments, it's got an auto leveler feature that will compress your vocals and your guitar into like a certain frequency range. And then it's got an auto EQ feature. So, like, I'm assuming it's probably still raining by you right now. We can't hear that because it's EQing out everything below a certain frequency range.
Yeah, you're right, and I had done some gigs on Zoom
Mm.
actually. It was one of the things I was trying, and there were used to be a couple of things that you could adjust to help sort
Yeah.
that out. They actually just introduced, and I've only used it once, but it seems good. A high quality audio feature within
Okay.
Zoom. So in the advanced settings now, you can go in and you can disable all the stuff that you're talking
Yeah.
about that
Yep.
made it, and you get their bandwidth's gone right out. So a lot of that stuff's possible. The first time I did a live stream, it was on my phone, and then when I tried to do a live stream on the laptop on Facebook, it was quite difficult the schedule thing, and
Yeah.
getting it to accept the audio from the interface rather than the laptop,
Yeah.
and then I didn't do one for quite some time. I've been using a piece of third party software, but then it happened to be I got invited to do one, and I just went straight to Facebook, and it's like 5 years had gone by. Suddenly I had this amazing interface that
Yeah.
seemed to work very, very well. So as I say, that dragging us all into that kind of modern
Yeah.
world can only be a good thing. But it's so for my live stream on Thursday, um, all I'm going to be doing is singing and playing the
Yeah.
guitar. I
You
have
you're leaving everything else up to somebody else.
Yeah, I have a sound man doing the live sound, and then I have a cameraman doing the filming. And as you say, it's 2 GoPros and then one handheld. But he has some kind of streamer that you can control from a tablet. So
Yeah. Absolutely.
he can monitor it, and he can change the cameras really, really simply.
Mhm.
But it's that extra pair of hands and eyes and
Oh, yeah.
ears.
Yeah. But I don't want to keep you too much longer. We haven't even talked about the documentary at all.
Hmm.
But what was kind of the idea behind that and releasing it in parallel with Clovis Limit 2?
Well, I wanted to grow my audience.
Hmm.
I wanted to grow my audience, and how do I do that? I looked at some of the things. So all my life, as we said, I grew up listening to these records, and I'm like, I used to describe myself as a musicologist because
Hmm.
I was really determined to uncover the links between. So why does Steve Earle's music speak to me in a very particular way? This guy from Texas
Hmm.
who records in Nashville, but why does it feel like the songs that my granddad used to sing when I was a kid? And that's because they all come from the Celtic tradition of songwriting, and the Celtic tradition of songwriting comes from northern Spain, and before that it goes back to Africa. So there are all these patterns in music, and I uncovered those by watching things like documentaries, and along the way I have a whole bookcase in the house full of biographies.
Yeah.
So Allman Brothers, Steve Earle, as we talked about, the Rolling Stones, Hendrix, you name it, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. I love reading those books, and they're all kind of stitched the wider narrative together. That really influences how I write, how I perform, how I talk about music. So, and that's very, very difficult to kind of put across when you're on stage for an hour and a half. You don't want to be spending all your time giving anybody a history of music lesson. So, but I wanted to communicate some of that stuff, and just by understanding, it also helped me to understand myself a little bit. Looking back at my childhood, and then trying to kind of convey the important information of that in a 60-second soundbite to hand out to the world. Maybe it had helped me come to terms with some stuff happened maybe when I was a kid. So there's a therapeutic element to it. But ultimately, these days it's about tribes. It's about we find like-minded individuals and we hang out with them. I do that.
Hmm.
When I was 16 years old, when I heard the Allman Brothers for the first time, there were like three other people in the world that I knew that liked the Allman Brothers, and we all went to see them play, and there
Hmm.
was like a room full of them. But then I didn't meet anybody else that liked the Allman Brothers for 10 years.
Yeah.
They're not a big band here. But nowadays, thanks to the internet, I know more people that like that band than ever.
Oh.
Because I follow those connections. So we're like a tribe now of Southern rock fans, and those guys, because of my kind of participation in that, some of those guys have now become fans of my music, and I've become fans of their music.
Yeah.
And so kind of teasing them stories out, and just telling them in a way that allows people to understand a bit more about me. That was what it was. That there's a Tom Petty documentary. Is it Running Down a Dream? I think it's called Tom Petty.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right.
Yeah, it's like 4 hours long. It's amazing. It's the hands down the best music documentary, or maybe 3 hours long. It's in two parts. That's how
Mm.
long it is.
Yeah.
And I love that. I mean, nobody wants to sit through 3 hours of my life to date. So I made it. The whole thing's in its unedited form. It's about 12 minutes long. I
Yeah.
split it into little 60-second segments just to share on social media. But it was all. I had extra time because I wasn't touring. I had to find ways of occupying myself. I looked at some of the ways that I could encourage people to kind of get behind me as an artist a bit more, and then I did those things. So that making a documentary, I did a series of interviews. A friend of mine came down and he interviewed me, and we talked about every song on the album. So every day for about the last 10 days, I've been sharing one of these little documentaries. So when the album comes out, if you need to know something about the song "Shoot You If You Run," you can pop over to my Facebook page, my fan
Yeah.
group, look in there, and then look it up, and then you might learn a bit more about it. Which is what I do when I'm,
Yeah.
like we said, talk about ACDC before,
Yeah.
and I kind of have a little look, and sort of find out a little bit more about them.
Yeah.
So it's just making that content available, really.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. But So you're about a little less than, I keep saying, wanting to say a week away. You're less than a week away.
5 days now. Yeah.
5 days. You got your release show on Thursday. That's going to be streaming. It's going to be on your Facebook page, or is it going to be on?
No, it's so you have to buy a ticket for it. So it's a private link. So if you
Okay.
buy a ticket from my web store,
Okay.
so from the Mike
Gotcha.
Ross Music .co.uk
Yeah.
website, and then you get emailed a pass.
Pass.
So
Yeah.
yeah, you get it's a private link you'll get, and then you come in. So it starts at 7 o'clock UK time. I have another band playing, and then that's the night before, and then the album comes out on
Right.
on Friday the
Yeah.
30th.
Gotcha. Awesome. And then where can everybody find you online? Where can they find all your current music and Clovis Limit 2 when it drops?
Yeah,
where can they
well, I
kind of?
mean, you'll find it on all the digital services. So Spotify, iTunes, Deezer, Tidal, the Apple
Hmm.
Music, whatever.
Yeah.
But the best place to start is my website, which is, as I say, it's www.mikerossmusic.co.uk. Um, and then from there, you'll find links to my socials: Facebook, Instagram, all of the Twitter,
Yeah.
all the usual ones,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much for giving us the time to sit here and chat. I know I originally said about 45 minutes. We went a little bit longer than that, but it was such a great conversation. Really appreciate that. One final question for you. Um, are you, now that we've talked about AC/DC's new song, and once your album releases, are you going to go listen to it? Try and find time to
Yeah,
listen to it?
I might go and listen to it after this conversation. Actually,
Okay.
it's one of them things that keeps popping. Say, oh yeah, I can listen to that song,
Yeah.
and then I drift off doing something else.
Yep.
So no, I think I'm going to make that the next thing that I do. I'm going to go and cook. We're going to have our Sunday meal together
Yeah.
now, and it's my turn to cook. So I
Okay.
guess I'll go put it on the on my yeah. I'll find it on iTunes or whatever,
Gotcha.
and the
Yeah.
kids will be screaming at me to turn it down.
Yeah,
And,
I gotcha. Yeah, I got to do my Sunday breakfast, which isn't really any different than Saturday breakfast or Monday breakfast. It's
it's just a
just,
day.
yeah, because I live about 1,000 miles from anyone in my family. So,
Okay. Oh
but
well, my wife and we have 3 kids, so
yeah,
and a dog. So there's plenty of requirement for sustenance in our
yeah,
family.
I got you. Awesome. Well, once again, thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll catch you.